Lisa Fithian, some of y'all know Sunsu Shakur, Jackie Samel, Carol Dyer, Emily Posner, and Brian Frank, who also lives here in Portland, were some of the key organizers that you never hear about. You know, and one of the sad things is that the media loves to reinforce the great man theory. They love to reinforce white great man theory also. And the fact that I'm standing here today is a recognition of that. I wrote the book, but I'm not the only person. There's thousands of voices, and so many voices get left. This is just in common ground. This doesn't even count all the people in New Orleans and in the Gulf Coast regions whose voices have been ignored or are minimized in all of this. And it's something I have to recognize every day and think about. So the heyday, the anarchy heyday was over. Between 2005 and 2008, it started to change, and lots of people started to leave, you know, because they were going on to other things. Because as activists, we love to work on emergencies. We like to leave them and go on to other things, even if shit's not finished. And in 2006, I was labeled a domestic terrorist. It was the first time I'd heard about it. The lawyer for the Angola 3 called me and said the FBI called them and said that I was listed as on the domestic terrorism index. I was listed as a domestic terrorist, an animal rights extremist, and an environmental terrorist. The thing is, yeah, but the thing is, it started this Kafkaesque tale because I couldn't do anything about it. I wasn't being charged with anything. So you can't fight it if you're not being charged. So what they did was they started a whisper campaign. So they're issuing documents to local law enforcement who were terrified of me, which I didn't know at the time. That makes sense. Like now, when I'm driving, I get pulled over, and I'm putting my hands up, I'm walking out of the car because they're terrified of me. Because it says I'm a domestic terrorist, and the war on terror. If you're gonna have a war on terror, you got to have terrorists. But really, it's not because I was so badass or any of us are so badass. It really is true. They have to create paper tigers. If you're going to have a war on terror, you've got to target people. And there's 4 distinct groups since 2000, at least since the late 90s and early 2000s. They have definitely, morning, y'all, that they have targeted. And one of those, and the largest in all the war on terror that I think we need to think about the most is Muslim people. In the United States, not just domestically. 98% of the cases are around Muslim, people of Middle Eastern descent, people assumed to being Muslim, Eastern European people. And in the over 500 cases, I think there's about 520, 530 cases, you know, Muslims have been the biggest target of that. The next biggest group after that has been animal rights and environmental people engaged in those things, especially radical things. But other mainstream groups like Greenpeace have also been targeted. And then the third group is political activists in general, but anarchists in particular. So I spun the wheel, and I came up with 3 of the 4 top categories, so I became a paper tiger. Lucky me, right? But it didn't make me feel badass. It actually terrified me. So, because at the same time, the ATF and the FBI were threatening to kick my door in to serve me search warrants. They were visiting my house regularly. The governor's mansion burned in 2008. I live about 10 blocks from the governor's mansion. Somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at it. And so they came to my house and my work regularly. The Texas State Police came there regularly, and other people, and they were fanning out because we were all terrorists. And then the Republican National Convention happened. 2 friends of mine built Molotov cocktails that they're going to use to do some property destruction. Changed their mind, but there's an informant amongst them, and that man was Brandon Darby, and he ratted them out. And he actually said originally that he was just saw something bad happening and needed to do something about it, but really he was not setting them up. I think it's encouraged is the legal definition, instead of entrapped them. So he's very sue happy. He loves lawsuits. So he encouraged them. He started to set the tone for that. And so after that broke, David McKay, who was one of the men, and Bradley Crowder, who were both friends of mine, David McKay's dad released, he got court documents, he released 70 pages of FBI unredacted documents, and my name was all in those documents amongst a bunch of other of my friends who had nothing to do with the Republican National Convention altogether. And in that, you could see that the FBI was targeting me, and that in Brandon's own words, Brad and David were collateral damage. And Jeff DeGrees, the lawyer for David McKay, his words were, and this is also really chilling, he said, "They're gunning for you." I was like, really? So I slept with a gun under my pillow for when the ATF was doing that. It wasn't rational or reasonable, but I had post-traumatic stress really bad, and I decided that if they're gonna bust it and shoot me, I'm gonna shoot back. after about a year, I calmed down from that. And somebody's like, here, why don't you just hold a camera, and when they come in, just videotape it all. And I was like, that's so much better. So much better. So I went through all this. This all became revealed. Finally, in 2010, I got, through FOIA requests from people, I was able to get my documents. I've been under surveillance since 1999. That was the first time I was visited by the FBI. That was the first time I ever heard the words animal rights and domestic terrorism together when they came to visit me at my work. And they questioned me. And after that, it started this beautiful odyssey. Well, it turned out, they had done everything that you can think about, except for raid my house. They had tapped my internet, my phone. They had, and Brandon Darby, it turns out, was the 5th informant in my life. He was the second one who tried to set me up. Another one was Chris Plummer, who was based in Houston, Texas, who tried to set me up in 2002. There were some statues of presidents that were going to be built for theme parks, and he wanted me to blow them up. And he had the key to the warehouse, he had the explosives, he knew about it. I was like, why are you even talking to me about this? This is a dumb fucking idea. Not because I don't agree with property destruction, but I'm like, why this? And so, also another woman named Courtney Clark, who went by Rhea Green in 2004, turned evidence on us. Chris Plummer did it because he was a cooperating witness, but this woman, Rhea Green, did it because she was a jerk. She didn't agree with our tactics. We had some confrontational tactics we were using against targeting executives at their homes in animal rights campaigns and in environmental campaigns. I didn't even live in Houston, but she started to turn evidence. So I had written a lot of communiques on how to do smashy smashy, and she outed all of my pseudonyms every time, which I didn't know at the time. Now she's an actress in New York, so if anybody ever sees her, Courtney Clark is her real name. She's still walking around. And then there was another one in Detroit that I don't know who it was, and they were trying to get me for they were saying I was involved in Animal Liberation Front stuff. So the FBI investigated me in 9 states and 13 field offices. There's 3 things they tried to get me for: stockpiling weapons. I'm from Texas, y'all. I do own guns, but I don't have a stockpile. 2 guns is not a stockpile. 2 legally purchased guns. The second thing they tried to get me for was being a nexus of terrorism. They're saying I was taking international funds, and I was running them through accounts, and then funding terrorism in the United States. And then the third thing was the Animal Liberation Front and Earth Liberation Front. There had been a lot of nighttime actions, there were a lot of unsolved arsons and vandalism that had happened around the United States, and they said I was responsible for a number of that. Because they were going after us. It was called we called it the Green Scare because they were going after us. Friends of mine were going to prison during this time. For a long time, for vandalism, basically. You have to understand. Even arson is vandalism. It's just at a large scale. It's property destruction. And people were getting 7, 8, 10, 20 years for that. Marie Mason's 20 years. Eric McDavid, 20 years. For a thought crime, in Eric's case. And you think about this, again, it fits in the mode. The war on terror is all about having terrorists. You've got to create them. You've got to manufacture them. And again, even though these are horrible situations where people are going to prison for essentially nothing, in Muslim communities, they're facing even longer terms. I have 2 friends who work with the Holy Land Foundation. They have material support for supposedly giving money to Hamas, but they were funding education, healthcare, and all these things. These are people I'd worked through the 90s at the Dallas Peace Center with, and they're serving 60 and 85 years for this. And that's not uncommon. And also, these people, the political prisoners who are going in, are being put not only in solitary often, they're being put in solitary, which they call CMUs, special terrorism units, where, in the case of like Daniel McGowan, who also did 7 years? 7 years. And my friend Andy Stepanian, I'm going to be able to see Daniel soon. I'm going to be able to hug him. I'm so excited about that. I'm sorry, I was just thinking about that. I'll see him in about a week. I'm so excited. But they're put in these CMUs where the only person they can talk to on the outside is a CIA officer. They get limited phone calls, way more limited than regular solitary. And all of their mail is, if they are able to send letters or receive letters, is gone over excruciatingly because they don't want any secret communications coming out. And this is where most of the Muslim people are put into, and some white activists also. So why would they do this? Well, it's to maintain power, capital P, power. They love it, they want to keep it. And this day is not a secret cabal, it's the systems that create it. And power is the social, economic, cultural, political power that they have. They want to maintain it.